Morning, Gamecock fans. Today is Wednesday, July the 30th, the year of our Lord 2025. This is Coffee with JC Shurburtt. Thanks for joining me this morning. Appreciate you guys all and gals all tuning in each and every morning during the week for coffee. Hopefully, get your day started off right with a little Gamecock football talk. It's Wide Open Wednesday on the Chief Sports Network. That means if you are not a Club Chief member, and if you'd like to be, you can join for the low price of $4.99 a month and get in the chat box and interact with us every day. And we have events and other stuff. You can join up on this YouTube channel, hit the membership button, perks, all that good stuff. And we'd love to have you. But on Wide Open Wednesday, on our super stream for Inside the Gamecocks, the morning show and the show, we let everybody rock and roll and get in. And certainly, whether or not you join, we love you anyway. We did that basically for, I don't want to say security reasons because that sounds kind of way too serious, but there were a lot of trolls and spam and it was distracting. And we just kind of made the decision that, if you're going to spend money every month on it, not a whole lot, but if you're going to spend money on it, chances are you're there to get something out of it and not distract us from the show. But on Wednesdays, we let everybody rock and roll. And certainly many of you who aren't members, we like to see back in the chat box. And the show, especially today with Mad Dog and I, will be really interactive. Got a lot of fun things. Got another VHS dates on that one. Jamie's got Kyle Lipsy in for Lipsy's Locker. He's the Associate Athletic Director of the University of South Carolina for apparel. So lots of uniform talk, and Kyle's got all kinds of stories, and that'll be good. And then Rob Williams from SEC Sunday Night, one of our newcomers here, will join Jamie from 10 to 12, and then 12 to 2, it's us. Then tonight, streaming on the app, Sports Talk with Phil Kornblut. I'm sure he's still got a lot of great preseason talk from Clemson, South Carolina, Coastal, all around our great state, the Palmetto State. He's an icon, obviously. A lot to Phil Kornblut. I grew up listening to his recruiting report. I don't think I would be into recruiting if it weren't for the work that Phil put in. And he also, I don't think I'd be talking to you right now because the first time I really kind of got on the radio was when I moved back to Columbia in '07 and started the Big Spur. And he was gracious and kind enough, taking a chance on me to go in and sit in with him on 1400 AM for what was then called Sports Talk First Edition. And we loved doing it every day. I think it was 10 to 12, a couple of hours over there at the studio. And then that kind of morphed into The Box with Corey Miller, which was a wonderful experience. Mike Morgan was part of that for a while. I took a little break from radio. Was on the radio in Greenville for a minute. That didn't really work out. It was a horrible company to work for, although there were good people in the building. But it's the same station Mark Ryan was on, ESPN or whatever. I worked with a lot of good people, but the ownership and management there was just god awful and still is to this day. I probably wouldn't. Well, we don't have to get into all that this morning, but I wouldn't do something to them if they were on fire. How about that? And then, we started kind of podcasting with Keith and Mike. JC and Morgan started around 2016. It's been almost a decade. They kind of morphed into what we've got today. So a whole deal with things, but all started with Phil giving me that opportunity. So he's from 6 to 8. And then tonight at 8 o'clock, we have the late night Gamecock show on Wednesdays. I need to kind of fix that on the promos because it looks like Wednesday is going to be the permanent night for them during football season. So Wednesdays, not Tuesdays for late night. Check your local listings, chiefsportsnetwork.com. We have the schedule up every day. But Matt Anderson, the late night Gamecock, and Alex Jones from thebigspur.com. That show's very analytical. Matt brings the stats and the heat, and Alex has the takes and the info, and it's fast paced and really good. It's a good listen, good watch for your Wednesday evenings if you're a big Gamecock fan, which most of you, I'm assuming, are. So that's the Chief Sports Network schedule for today. Gamecocks have media day tomorrow. I said yesterday, the Birdies with Beamer press conference didn't have too much because they were kind of coming off of a trip to a clinic in Greenville, and sort of had to get have some meetings and get some info to share injury wise and summer progress wise. Beamer said it twice. So Shane Beamer will talk to the media tomorrow at Media Day. A lot of photos and stuff like that will go down. And so stay tuned for all that. That'll be complete coverage here, thebigspur.com, all that good stuff. I want to talk today about the most important position on the field. South Carolina obviously is blessed as a program because I've said this many times. Even Ohio State last year won the national championship. They had to go get uh, quarterback Will Howard from Kansas State to come in. So, you know, they recruit as well as anybody in the country. I mean, they sent Aaron Nolan to South Carolina, and they've are always signing big time quarterbacks, and they'll have a new one this year that's battling it out with another blue chipper, and that's just kind of how it goes with those folks that recruit at that level. You get a lot of guys, you can only play one. They usually transfer out. I mean, Ohio State really, if you think about it, I mean, they sent Joe Burrow to LSU. And that guy obviously was special when he got to LSU. So Ohio State's been doing well at that position for a long, long time. And that's good. So, but you kind of run into depth issues sometimes, even at the best of programs. So Carolina's been pretty blessed to have Spencer Rattler and LaNorris Sellers back to back. They're two different quarterbacks, obviously, but Rattler was the first Gamecock quarterback drafted since Todd Ellis. May start with the Saints this year. I don't know what their plans are. I've seen his clips from camp, and he's throwing it pretty well. But he was a tremendous talent. I mean, his last year did not go so well, but that was not his fault. He was kind of the reason Carolina was in games many times, especially early on in the season before the defense got figured out and all that in 23. But then to have LaNorris Sellers behind him and, after a typical start to last season with a first-time starter and all that good stuff, it worked out, and hopefully it works out again this year. There's a lot of expectations. I just was kind of reviewing Beamer's press conference yesterday from Birdies with Beamer, and the action figure thing came up. And by the way, you can order those on GamecockTraditions.com. That's one of our sponsors. I may get one myself. My wife collects those Pop Funkos, and I've bought a few. These are not Pop Funkos, but the LaNorris Sellers action figure, I'm kind of looking over at it now. Probably look pretty good amongst the Pop Funkos that we have. So I may get one, but support the call, support NIL, right? But he's got a lot of high expectations both here and nationally. I mean, you don't get voted as the preseason all SEC quarterback for nothing. By the media. And then a lot of media members are just picking him apart. I heard the dumbest take ever on SEC Sunday night. I'm just going to tell you, from a guy from PFF, he committed the cardinal sin on LaNorris Sellers in the J.C. Shurburtt. It's part of my doctrine. There's some things that are just so bad take wise that you just wonder why people get paid to do the job they do. And I'm sure I've had some bad takes. And football evaluation is very, very subjective. And, I've been flat out wrong about guys. But what I do try to avoid, I try to avoid player comparisons as it is. But what I also try to avoid is, surface level player comparisons. And he compared LaNorris Sellers to Anthony Richardson. There is not, besides the fact that Anthony Richardson for 1 week, a couple of years ago, was after beating Utah. I think it was Napier's first year at Florida. What was that, 2022? Besides that, the hype train. I mean, Anthony Richardson really had some issues. If you remember, they beat Utah and then Kentucky came to town and Kentucky beat him about 10 points and he threw it right to him. I'm not saying LaNorris has never made mistakes. he's not infallible. But when you compare the two at the same stage, it's not comparable, especially in the passing game. Did the did you draw that comparison watching Missouri? Did you draw that comparison, watching a lot of different times that LaNorris Sellers is really good throwing the football, some of the throws he makes. He's not Joe Milton either. But that would be even more egregious. I know Anthony Richardson was the number 4 pick in the draft and made a lot of money, but he's struggling with the Colts. I, I think that's just insulting. I think that's the lack of homework. I don't know where those comparisons come from, other than they're both big and athletic. And the worst take ever. I was just like, he's kind of downplaying him and all that. And that's fine. I mean, people pick him apart, but I'm like, Anthony Richardson. And so if you read that out there, call him out, man. There's nothing similar about those two guys other than they made, the same build. I don't get it. I just don't get it. If I'm not saying LaNorris Sellers is perfect, and certainly he's not and makes mistakes, but you compare him to I mean, Richardson was like probably one of the most raw quarterbacks that they took that high in the history of the NFL draft. There's no comparison between those two as college players. If you want to focus on the Ole Miss film, when LaNorris was coming off injury or something like that, that's fine. I mean, my God, do you expect? I mean, his completion percentage statistically was relatively high compared to the other returning quarterbacks in the SEC. I mean, you want to sit there and ignore the good games, and I mean, I don't understand it. You want to sit there and just watch cut ups of bad passes? That's probably smart when you're evaluating, but there's things he needs to work on. But that Anthony Richardson comparison's bogus. I mean, it's ridiculous. And I don't get it. And I heard coaches last year make it. Brian Kelly, I think, made it. But that was before. I think that the word got out. you know, I don't. I'm just not buying that. Anyway, I didn't mean to get off on a tangent there, but Carolina's very blessed to have LaNorris Sellers. But I was listening to the morning show, Whittle on All Things, the John Whittle segment, and you can catch that on our YouTube page. We got it all cut up commercial free for you. Whittle also writes a column on thebigspur.com called All Things. Whittle covers all things: football, baseball, basketball, equestrian, everything. Whittle doesn't dive into women's basketball that much, but everything else, Whittle's pretty good. He's kind of an all sports guy, and certainly an invaluable member of the bigspur.com staff, and a good friend of mine as well. But his segment's been killing it the last couple of weeks. And he and Mike Morgan and Jamie Bradford got on the subject of quarterbacks. And Mike said this, and this was interesting. He said, and Mike loves quarterbacks, right? Mike is a quarterback connoisseur, if you will. He loves the position, really into the draft, all that good stuff. And I don't know that Mike would rank LaNorris Sellers as the number one quarterback in the SEC right now. But they were talking about the quarterback room as a whole, coming off the Landon Duckworth commit. Now, Landon's not in the room right now, but he'll be there. And probably, if all things go well this year, and hopefully they do, Sellers probably will be gone to the NFL. So they won't play together. But, Mike was around the program from the late 90s on, and was there for Lou Holtz and a good chunk of early Spurrier. And made the point that, historically, South Carolina really has not had tremendous depth at quarterback. He said, the Brad Scott era, obviously, they were normally one injury away from disaster, and it happened in 97 when Anthony Wright got hurt. Lou Holtz's first year when Phil Petty was hurt was that was tough. You've had true freshmen thrown out there to the Wolves. Jake Bentley, Ryan Helinski was thrown out there for a season. Luke Doty in 2020 was put out there. It's been, it's been kind of that position has not, although quarterbacks, I mean, there's legends that have played the position at Carolina, starting back way with Jeff Grants in the 70s. all the way up through Mike Hold and Todd Ellis and Steve Tannehill. And I mean, the list goes on, right? Bobby Fuller was good for a couple of years here too. I mean, transferred from App State with Sparky Woods. And Anthony Wright, who I mentioned, Phil Petty, the late Phil Petty, on up through the Holtz era. But depth's always been a concern. Depth was a concern during Spurrier. I always say '09, it could have turned out a lot different for the program because '09 was a critical year to kind of make some progress. I think Spurrier was getting frustrated, but he did have a whole new staff. And that '09 team, they beat Clemson at the end. That was huge. The Papa John's frozen pizza bowl. That just kind of goes to show you that bowl results take them for what they're worth because the next year Carolina won the East. They signed Marcus Lattimore in 2010. I mean, that was a turning point in the program. Carolina played Florida very, very close. Florida did not win at all that year because they lost to Alabama. It was still a Tim Tebow-led Florida team. I'll never forget those uniforms that day either. But had Stephen Garcia gotten hurt, I mean, Reed McCullum, I think, was the backup. Man, that the previous year they were rotating Garcia, who wasn't quite ready, with Chris Smelly. Connor Shaw was a backup as a true freshman in 2010, and then Shaw ended up taking the job. And then Dylan Thompson emerged, and that was good. And, you kind of knew Dylan was going to get it. But then think about 2015. The best guy for that job that year was Perry Orth, but they tried Connor Mitch. Mitch was a little better in preseason practice from what I was told, and he quickly lost confidence. Orth went in. They tried Lorenzo Nunez, and then Orth played out the string, and they were more competitive. And Perry was a good quarterback. Don't get me wrong. I mean, he was pretty good. And then the next year, you go McElwain for a while. I mean, it's just the Jake Bentley era happened, and then on and on and on. And in 2021, you had Colin Hill for 1 year, and then in 2021, Doty gets hurt. Zeb Nolan has to go in. They got Jason Brown for a few. I mean, Brown was a transfer portal quarterback as well, just like Spencer Rattler, but from St. Francis, he had a good run. But man, that it's been an adventure. Fast forward to the Shane Beamer era, year 5, and we're all sitting here debating heatedly about whether a 6th-year Luke Doty, who was a top 200 prospect, 4-star guy out of Myrtle Beach, and a former starter, is a better option to back up Sellers than a couple of freshmen. Aaron Olin as a redshirt freshman and Cutter Woods as a true freshman. And then they just beat Auburn on Landon Duckworth, who's a top 70, top 60 recruit in the country, a top 10 quarterback prospect nationally. And all these guys can move. I mean, there's no, I mean, if you include Duckworth with these 5 quarterbacks, and include, Cutter, Woods, Aaron Olin, Sellers, obviously, and then Doty, they all can move. I mean, some better than others. Doty, LaNorris, and Duckworth are obviously what I think are elite runners at the quarterback position. And then Aaron Olin and Cutter are both good armed players that can, get out of trouble. They're not statues. So there's that part of it too. But what Jamie and Mike were talking about, Mike says, they are closer. South Carolina's quarterback room is closer to Georgia, Texas, and Bama than it is maybe to like a Mississippi State, Missouri, those types of programs, Auburn. Not that Auburn's the same type of program as Mississippi State, but, it's a struggle some places. I mean, look, the Florida Gator Nation is panicking right now because DJ Lagway's in a walking boot. Now, I'll say this. If LaNorris Sellers was in that situation, we'd all be panicking as well. But there's not a lot of depth. I mean, these guys move, change schools, and you can find yourself in a situation in a hurry. And that's why you need to have as many options as possible. Shane Beamer said it before. He likes to have a lot of quarterbacks in the room. It helps you in practice and things like that. And, Mike Shula's done an outstanding job, I think, in recruiting Duckworth. And they're already starting on 2027, and they'll probably get another pretty good one there. So, That's important. And you have to really go back. I think the last time Carolina had a lot of good options at quarterback was '04, and that was kind of a messy year. I don't know about messy, but that was Holtz's final year, and I think that you had a lot of different styles. You had Dondrell Pinkins, and he didn't stay healthy. And then Savell Newton came in and played some. And then, Blake Mitchell was a young quarterback. Of course, he would start the next year. And Blake actually came in, I think, against Kentucky and did some good things. Probably wasn't quite ready. And then Mike Rath was a JUCO guy that they had brought in that actually was a hero in that Kentucky game and threw a touchdown to Troy Williamson to win it 12-7 in a scary, scary game against a bad Kentucky team. But that's the last time I can really think about, you know, the room and the recruiting kind of matching up. I mean, Spurrier, like I said, did not have a whole lot of depth, but if two of them were close, though, he'd play them both, right? But and these guys are all, like I said, mobile guys and somewhat athletic with good arms. So it kind of fits the model. So I look at it and I think, taking off from what Mike said, I think that's great for now and for the future. Like I said, they're probably all not going to be there at the same time. I mean, Doty's gone. 6th year, he won't get a seventh, despite some people getting seventh these days. But it'll be if LaNorris does go to the pros after this season, it's going to be a pretty interesting battle between the young guys. Now, the other part of this is somebody could transfer. Heck, two of them could transfer. That's part of life at quarterback, and that's why you keep recruiting. I'm not even sure they won't go. They've signed a transfer portal quarterback most years. I'm not even sure that they won't go and get one this offseason as well. Just kind of depending on how things shake out. And it's an interesting group when you look at these five. South Carolina as a state is probably not all that well known for quarterbacks these days. You don't often have really good quarterbacks coming out of say South Carolina, and the recruiting industry obviously. Probably, they're definitely were wrong about LaNorris Sellers. Composite 4-star. Some had him as an 88 3-star. They're probably going to be wrong about Cutter Woods. Interesting thing about those two, both in-state kids who initially committed to other programs. LaNorris Sellers was committed to two. Early commit to Virginia. Virginia's OC goes to Syracuse. He decommits from Virginia and commits to Syracuse, and then Carolina flipped him at the end. Some of us wake up in a cold sweat at night with the nightmare that Dylan Lonergan commits to Carolina that summer instead of, surprisingly, actually going to Alabama, and LaNorris never gets recruited by the Gamecocks. And then I think if he's at Syracuse that far from home, he does get in the portal and ends up at probably a team that's on the schedule, or like North Carolina. I you know I don't. That was dodging a bullet in recruiting. Sometimes you do because it's an inexact science and all that. And nothing against Dylan Lonergan. He's now at Boston College. We'll see if he does well under Bill O'Brien. I think he probably will. But LaNorris Sellers, you take him over just about everybody in the country because of his rarity and skill set and who he is as a person. And that's another thing that kind of chaps my behind about the Anthony Richardson comparison. Anthony Richardson obviously struggled reading defenses and probably still does. He's getting better. So you're basically just saying LaNorris Sellers is just an athlete playing quarterback, based on some clips that you don't interpret properly and there's no homework. And that's why, honestly, PFF, I use it, I look at it, I got respect for the work that's put in. But I've never taken what they say about their evaluations as something that's a gospel. It's nice to read, nothing more. Don't get caught up in it. I've seen some fans get caught up in the PFF ratings, like when Carolina takes somebody from the portal. He was this, that, and the other. Well, I don't know. Now things like Nick Sharp and 481 snaps only gave up 2 sacks. That's obvious. That's not subjective. That's like, okay, you either did or you didn't. Hopefully they're grading that properly. So, because you got, good expectations on Nick Sharp now, uh, largely based on those statistics because he missed spring. Nick Sharp, by the way, is the offensive guard that transferred in from Wake. Cutter Woods was committed to Wake Forest. And so Sellers and Woods, in-state guys, initially committed to out-of-state ACC schools, and LaNorris was committed to two of them. Interesting. And we wonder sometimes why the ACC produces these draft picks. Sometimes they're smarter with how they do it. Luke Doty, like I said, was a top, in-state guy too from Myrtle Beach, top 200 recruit. Air Nolan was almost a 5-star. I think some had him as a 5-star out of College Park, Georgia. And I started out at Ohio State. And that's interesting too, because you kind of look at the transfer portal quarterbacks they've brought in, and where you're at. I mean, gosh, people are talking about John Mateer winning the Heisman. He was at Washington State last year. Incarnate Word had Cam Ward before Cam Ward went to Washington State and worked his way up. You just know Baker Mayfield back in the day was a walk-on at TCU before he went, or walk-on at Texas Tech before he went to Oklahoma and balled out. So, it's inexact. I'm not saying never take a player from a lower level, but Zeb Nolan was Iowa State and then North Dakota State, which is a great program. And then Jason Brown came in from St. Francis of PA, which now they were FCS. I think now they've moved back down to Division III because of the House settlement and all this stuff. So he came in, but then Spencer Rattler, Oklahoma. Robbie Escher came in from Auburn and Oregon. He's now at Wake Forest. Even Davis Bevel was at Oklahoma. Greenville kid that was the third teamer last year, but an invaluable role with leadership, and our Air Nolan, like I mentioned, Ohio State. So those are some guys from some good programs. And, I've always been under the impression, like I mentioned, the level you come from the portal, you can either play or not. I think sometimes, though, I'll say this, there's some what you call low-hanging fruit in the portal with regards to backup quarterbacks at good schools or big schools, because those guys, they want to play. Like Spencer Rattler, nothing wrong with him at all. Just got beat out by Caleb Williams, and they decided to go with Caleb and, well, shake hands and move on. So I mentioned Joe Burrow earlier. I mentioned Baker Mayfield earlier. Kyler Murray at Oklahoma, Jalen Hurts. That situation. He wasn't going to beat Tua out and sat for a year, then decided he wanted to go play. So you can find probably some. I don't want to say deals, but you can find some really good players as backups at bigger schools, and sometimes they're a little better than maybe a starter that wasn't as productive at the FCS level. But then sometimes you get Cam Ward. And then sometimes you get Brock Vandegrift. There's a backup at a big school that didn't work out too well, right? So, it's inexact, but I think Carolina's done a good job of going and finding guys that make sense in the quarterback room. And this is the most important position on the field. You have to recruit it well, and you have to be prepared for your depth to take a hit every year, because you're going to have transfers, and I can't guarantee you that Carolina won't have any transfers. But I think if you hit the portal and you're mindful of it and aware of it, it's interesting because I think Shane Beamer, since he's been here, there's been years where at certain positions the depth isn't quite there. That's part of taking over a new program sometimes, and misses in recruiting or what have you. And, shoot, the former running backs coach, everybody left early out of his room, and then he couldn't land anybody to replace him from high school. So, things like that come up in college football. But one thing I have noticed about him, if there's a season that Carolina has gone through under Shane Beamer and the depth isn't there, they need numbers, and you're like, man, they just don't have much depth, that gets fixed quickly. I mean, think about it. Think about, like I mentioned, the first year quarterbacks. You had Zeb, Doty got hurt, DeCarrion Joyner played the bowl game, Jason Brown came in for a minute. Man, it's a large number of quarterbacks that took snaps for Carolina that year. And Rattler comes in, but they continue to recruit and had players behind him, obviously, in 2022. And then 2023, you had LaNorris. I mean, Doty was the backup in 2022, by the way. And then 23, LaNorris Sellers was the backup. And, they had still had Doty there and some other guys. And then you got the situation last year with Ashford and Bevel, and then this year. So that got fixed. Tight end, they lost every tight end after 2022. Went and stocked it again, and they continue to have good numbers. Their offensive line, never again 2023. Running back. And I know that without Faison, 4 is not ideal. That's the one spot you kind of go, in 2023, defensive line, corners, linebackers, they rarely came off the field. I mean, they were thin, even on the back end. Nicky and Memori and those guys played a bunch in 2023. Now you got depth. So, to Beamer and his staff's credit, they don't wait around and go, oh, well, we'll just hopefully we don't have any injuries and we don't need depth and competition there. It's starting to be where every position, they're battling it out, and that makes your program better. That's how the great programs have done it. When you're at practice, because you can't play another team, right? When you're at practice and your second and third team full of players that could, conceivably start elsewhere, at least they're good and they're not walk-on. No offense to walk-ons that work their ass off out there every day. I love those guys. But they're talented guys, and you get a look like you're going to get in the game. It makes you better. Makes you play better. Quarterback as well. The competition this year obviously is behind Sellers, but it's a great competition. It's going to make Aaron Nolan and Cutter Woods and Luke Doty better players this year. And then Landon Duckworth will be thrown into the fire the next year. And so if you're looking for another sign that this program is positioned, there's a season to play coming up. You can't just win them on paper and with recruiting and roster opinions, right? Another sign that this program is taking steps forward. Remember that quote from Mike Morgan. Carolina's getting close at the quarterback position, and that's good for the future. With the caveat that, hey, just like Ohio State, there may be a year you have to go get a guy from the portal or two. Who knows? All right. Check out the morning show, Lipsy's Locker, starting at 10. Don't forget late night tonight, 8 o'clock, Sports Talk 6 to 8. It's wide open Wednesday. So join Mad Dog and I for the show starting at noon or shortly thereafter. And we appreciate you tuning in to Coffee. Please like, subscribe, and share on this YouTube channel. Check out all of our other videos, and we will holla at you soon.